It's not just the many faces of actor Sacha Baron Cohen.
Wagwan, everything.
It's the reactions his characters get from real people and the famous.
So my idea is what?
To make a drip-proof ice cream.
Can you please explain to him
I
what we
can't.
are
I'm
doing?
trying hard because he keeps telling me about buying a slave. We don't do that.
I'm just dancing.
Now, Cohen's back with 4 new characters in Who is America? His famous face even more disguised.
שקט צעיר. My name, Colonel Eran Morad.
His guests, unaware they're part of an elaborate prank to get them to say outrageous things that may, and keep that in mind, may reflect an extreme version of their views.
I would like you to help me do instructional video for 3-year-olds.
Just remember to point Puppy Pistol's mouth right at the middle of the bad man.
So is this brilliant satire? Is it just comedy? Is it cruel pranksterism? A lot of people talking about it, and we're going to talk about it now with Sarah Boesveld, a senior writer with Chatelaine. Stephen Marche is a culture critic and author, and Bee Quammie is a freelance writer who's written for Hazlitt, Ebony Magazine and Vice. Pranksterism. I don't even know if that's a word, but you know what I'm trying to say, Sarah? What do you think?
He's a prankster, really. You know, his whole shtick is that he's going to come in and manipulate this image and really try to convince these people to say extreme things. The problem I have is that these extreme views are real. And in this climate that we're in, there's a lot of fake news, there's a lot of outrage. I think there is some value in putting a mirror up against some of these views that are quite extreme. You know, joking about having children be armed in schools is not really a joke after the school shootings that we've seen, but these Republican politicians are willingly celebrating this idea, and I think that's something that should be giving us pause, and it's not.
Some people watching might think there's no way to disagree with that. Stephen has a way.
Oh, I definitely disagree with that. I mean, I think the thing about Sacha Baron Cohen is that, on the one hand, he is a genius, and this show definitely captures his genius. He's one of the greatest clowns that's ever been. But what he does is really unnecessary right now, and it's actually kind of destructive right now, because what he does is muddy the waters, and what he does is show, a parodic view of politicians, and he shows that you can manipulate images to really make people say, well, we already know that. Mm-hmm. You know, we've already lived through all of that, and comedy kind of is the fake news of the left, right? Where you get this kind of line between what's just entertainment and what's actual news blurs.
Well, just hang on a second, though. Fake news, I mean, those are fighting words around here. I mean, comedy's not fake news, comedy's comedy.
But people go to comedy for news, and they go to comedy to get their political opinions, and they go to comedy to get their political opinions confirmed. And they're going in this context of the extreme manipulation of image. I would just point out that to make Republicans say insane things, you do not need elaborate ruses. You can read them in the pages of the Wall Street Journal, where they say things like, there should be no fiat money, right? There should be no paper money in the world. Like, to make it parody actually diminishes what they're saying, and it also takes away what we really need right now. It's not more parody. We need more clarity. And he provides the opposite of it.
Thanks, Lion. B, I'm going to come to you in just one sec, but I want to play a clip here from the other Joe Walsh, former congressman from Illinois, now a radio host, and here's a little excerpt of what he said on this show.
The intensive 3-week kindergarten course introduces specially selected children from 12 to 4 years old to pistols, rifles, semi-automatics, and a rudimentary knowledge of mortars.
B, your reaction to that?
You know what? It was just really difficult to watch and really difficult for me to find the comedy or the levity in it. On one hand, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about the idea of, Michelle Obama's quote, when they go low, we go high. And there are some people who say with a show like this, you don't need to stoop to that level of ridiculousness in order to make a point. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with that 100% all the time. Sometimes I think you've got to fight fire with fire to push a needle, and I think that's what Sacha Baron Cohen thinks he's doing. But like what Steve said, right now it's detrimental because it's just hopeless. It's not a time where you can watch something like this and turn off the TV and laugh about how ridiculous it is, because you can open the paper and read something else that's utterly ridiculous that's happening in real life. And I think that the problem is Sacha Baron Cohen, his comedy and what he's trying to do has not really changed, and it's not a slight to him saying he hasn't evolved, but the world has changed. So it's not fitting the way it used to fit, because right now you look at something like this, I'm looking at this, you know, these jokes about children carrying guns, and it's like despair, it's hopelessness. So
quickly, I want to hear from all of you on this. So Joe Walsh, the guy that we just saw, he says on CNN that he was duped here. That what happened was he got a call that he was going to get an award from Israel in Washington. He flew from. You're looking so skeptical. He flew from Chicago.
This is a grown man.
This is his excuse. It's amazing.
So he flew from Chicago to Washington, and he got the award, and then he was put in front of a teleprompter, and he said a bunch of complimentary things about Israel, a country he supports, and then they slipped this in. So I feel like I'm not convincing you, or he's not convincing you. Does that change anything at all? That maybe this, well, it was an elaborate ruse, and does that soften at all the outrage that you have about this?
No, these are, it just makes me sad that these people are not smarter. I mean, they're running files of policy that affect people's lives, and they're making decisions on behalf of people who elected them. And so if they're just willing to just play into this elaborate ruse, I mean, it can't have been that elaborate.
Yeah, I mean, but it's, I sort of think it's sort of like what Bee said. It's like, were you thinking like, oh, this guy has a lot of integrity? And he's really gonna carefully scrutinize what he's reading on a teleprompter before he says it. You know, that's not what a Republican, any politician really, in 2018, that's not what we think about it. And so he's essentially making fun of our antiquated ideas that we used to have about respect for public figures.
We're going to switch topics that you can be really earnest about, and it's how charming Dwayne Johnson is, The Rock. And I'm going to ask you to make a choice here. Your favorite Dwayne Johnson role of the three we're going to offer you, okay?
Oh my gosh.
Maui in Disney's Moana.
Okay.
Luke Hobbs in Fast and Furious. And the Tooth Fairy in The Tooth Fairy. Which is your favorite?
Luke Hobbs.
All right.
Luke Hobbs gets it for me, so that's my fave.
Why?
I don't know, he's just made for that role.
When this whole thing is over, we're gonna find a location, and I'm gonna knock your teeth so far down your throat, you're gonna stick a toothbrush right up your ass to brush them.
Always nice to have The Rock on the show, but of course we're mentioning him because are you guys not fans?
I'm a big fan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who doesn't like The Rock?
Yeah, apparently she doesn't. But,
yeah, I'm just not buying tickets to his movies.
So, and a lot of people, there are questions about who will buy tickets to Skyscraper, where he plays someone who has lost a limb, had a limb amputated, and there's been some controversy about whether someone who hasn't had an amputation should be playing that role. What do you think of that?
I mean, the discussion around inclusion and representation in Hollywood is at a fever pitch right now. And people are seeing there was the Oscars So White campaign that happened that really kind of pushed things forward and now has given the room for more people to have a voice and kind of have some more power around those discussions that happen. So it's not surprising to me that right now the communities of people with disabilities are looking at this movie and looking at this role and thinking that this is not a good idea. It's interesting that Dwayne Johnson, he has partnered with an advocacy group around getting people with disabilities more recognition in Hollywood, and then he takes this role. And I think in Hollywood, sometimes to break that status quo, there's always this idea of, well, we need a big star to break this blockbuster summer movie, and I get that. But if you're going to be an advocate, how are you using your power to help other people and open doors for other people to have that representation? Because I understand actors want to act and take on different roles and they want that challenge, but I think we're really missing something authentic when we're not opening the doors for people who live those experiences to then bring that into the artistic realm. So,
you know what's interesting, though, is that in the social media reaction to this, there were some people who definitely took that view and took it in a strident way, not in the thoughtful way that you've expressed it. But then there were also people who, some of who had disabilities, and who said, one in particular I remember seeing where a young person said, I was just thrilled to see Dwayne Johnson playing that role, and it made me actually feel good. What do you think?
It's such a fine line because, I mean, you know, these representation questions are very real and they're very thorny and problematic. But you know, ultimately, acting is about becoming another person, and you know, makeup is not all blackface, right? Like it's not. where does this end? Like, where is the line? Like, are we going to get to a point where it's like, well, young actors shouldn't play old actors because that's ageism? I don't know. Like, I don't think there is actually a very clear answer to me. I mean, I would say that, like, you know, this, for some reason, this didn't come up with Fury Road, where it was this, maybe that's because it was a futuristic thing. But on the other hand, like, at what point are we missing the point of acting, which is to inhabit the life of another person, which is inherently a problematic proposition and inherently one with power problems. And are we going to lose? Are we just going to, you know, abandon that whole process in the pursuit of, you know, of some kind of reconciliation that may not happen? You know.
45 seconds. Last word to you.
Well, I think the problem is that there's such power in media, movies, television, to shape a culture and how people feel included in a culture.
Yeah.
And so it is really important to have authentic representation. And so I think it's a really good first step that Dwayne Johnson is actually engaging on these issues while taking this role. And I know people have an issue with him taking the role to start with. But what I would like to see next is so much more work behind the scenes and another film that comes out soon where it's, you know, there really is an actor with an authentic difference of ability that is in a role playing that character, and then maybe this conversation can facilitate that kind of machination behind the scenes. I think if maybe it'll lead to something good in that way.
It won't be a Rock movie, right? Like, that's the thing. It won't be. The Rock is the biggest star in the world.
But it shouldn't be an independent art house film either. It should be something that is still a large movie house that is got real financial backing. It doesn't have to be the blockbuster of the summer, but it will really mean something to include these actors who are out there looking for work and are good actors.
But then you're not going to have a blockbuster movie with a, you know, with a person with a disability.
What I'm saying is that it doesn't necessarily matter yet that it's a blockbuster movie. It just matters that we're having this conversation now and that this movie is a legitimate movie that people want to go see, that maybe does have a star actor in it as well, but also has somebody who is in a breakout role.
I feel I've lost control of the time here. So thank you guys very much. This is a great conversation. We're going to do this periodically on the program. My one regret is that we didn't get to you talking about Cher singing ABBA songs, which, you know, we'll have a chance to do that later.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks to all of you.
Thank you.